if we like want to zoom all the way out, I think like the internet is kind of like half complete. There's this like famous quote from Stuart Brand. It's like the information wants to be free, but it has a second half that not many people know, which is like information also wants to be expensive, and that tension will not go away.
So is this thing on right now? We're on. Oh,
we're live.
We're live. Welcome to a very special episode of Internet Explorers, live IRL in the Manor Hotel here in New York City. Thanks to them for their hospitality. We were all going to be here in New York, and we thought it would be a really good opportunity to somehow convince somebody who's been kind of all over the timeline recently to come in and talk with us. But before we sort of reveal who that... Wait, we've probably talked about this already. God damn, I'm tired of stuff.
We can pretend.
How you doing, Josh? Look at this.
I'm great, man. This is awesome.
This is the first time, awesome. I think we've done one other IRL one before at Farcon last year, and so here we are again at Farcon this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to get into it because there's just going to be too much to get into. We're super excited today to have Jacob from Zora.
Hey.
Cut to Jacob from Zora. Nice. All right. We got this whole thing figured out. Yeah, man. Welcome.
Thank you.
Super excited to get into this because you have been a bit of a main character on... Well, yes, Zora has been a bit of a main character on Twitter. Maybe not so much you. Somebody else maybe more main character in that world, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I thought it'd be... we've had a long collaboration. I turn to you for advice very often. And so I guess I have the pleasure of knowing you and seeing the history of Zora and having sort of deep faith and trust in you and your team. And I think maybe much of the internet maybe doesn't have that sort of experience with you guys yet. So hopefully today we can kind of get into some of like the early days to provide some context, some of the maybe decisions you guys have made recently, and then hopefully we have time to get into the future here.
Yeah.
And there'll be some nuggets along the way, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, it's super stoked. So my first question for you though is, because feel like I've seen Zora from the very beginning, and I don't think I've asked you this before, but I'm very curious how you pitched, or what was the narrative or the frame for Zora V1 or pre V1, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I guess we're going back in time to 2020.
Great year.
Yeah. So I guess like where Zora actually came from was, I did a side project in 2019 while still at Coinbase called Saint Fame. And it was a remix of the Unisocks drop that the Uniswap team did, where they tokenized a pair of socks and just dropped it into Uniswap. And I love that because I was going deep on Uniswap at the time. We just rolled out USDC and we were like, building liquidity on chain. And I just loved seeing something so innocuous, like from the fashion world, basically, going on chain. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a mind-blowing realization that you can use financial tools, or you can use crypto for things that aren't necessarily associated with that at all at face value. And, I went super deep on like, okay, let's tokenize a shirt. It like launched at like $8. It went up to like $16,000 and got a whole bunch of hype. And we actually got these like amazing shirts made. People redeemed them, went through the whole thing. And I nerded out on making sure that I could tie all of that value into a DAO on chain called Saint Fame. I wanted to create a community-owned fashion brand. No one really cared about the DAO. Everyone loved the tokenizing the objects piece. So it's kind of blurry. It was like a combination of like everything exchange was like one of the ways that we described Zora. And then it was like, hey, there's so much value that's like laying on the internet and in culture. What if we can help tokenize all of the different things that people are creating, both in the real world and then online, and use crypto to help creators capture more value than they ever have? And that started with, tokenizing things like physical goods. And we very quickly moved into the pure digital world. And ironically went from, what if you just drop everything in Uniswap as a token to the NFT stage? It's now funny coming back full circle, and it was like, well, it probably could have just been digital and Uniswap the whole time.
Well, I'm curious, would you pitch it differently today? Or is there a lot of similarities there?
There's a lot of similarities. I think like what I speak about more often these days is coming at it from the content and social side, because we went on this whole journey of like, well, okay, what are creators? Who are the creators we're targeting? And it was like, well, there are people on the internet who are creating a bunch of things of value and have a hard time capturing that in traditional financial system. And like crypto reveals that. So that was like with NFTs and like media, art, and content. And we've just chased that and basically iterated infinitely on like, well, what is the most effective way to help people tokenize their content? So I talk about it less from the tokenizing culture side and more about like, this is how you can create and capture value around information and media on the internet.
Yeah. And it feels like you've been on this like kind of, steady journey towards more like internet native markets or like more liquid markets. And I guess like, especially starting the fact that you started with the kind of Uniswap model and then got into NFTs and then came back to it. I'm curious what took you so long to get to this point, or like, what did you get?
You were there, baby.
What like framing did you get like stuck in along the way that kind of pushed you towards NFTs and then kind of fungible NFTs and then now ultimately coins?
I've thought about this so much, and I think basically the market was just so small, and then this is pre L2s or like cheaper networks, and it was like there was less than 500 people on the internet who were willing to buy pictures. And I think like the one-of-one auction model at the time was actually the most effective for that market size, because given the number of creators who were using it and the number of collectors, that was actually the maximal way to get the most value.
Right.
Because it was like, okay, there's going to be one buyer, they're all going to be competing, they've all got a lot of ETH. And that was the appropriate market size.
The auction was just the funnest way to participate in it too.
Yeah,
right?
It was basically like you'd have these 24-hour auctions take over the whole timeline. And it was like obviously Super Rare and Foundation were also there. And like that was the size of the total market of people willing to buy crypto-based media. And then obviously that reached a local maximum. So it was like, well, how do we expand it? And then we moved into editions. And then that took it from, maximum 1,000 MTUs up to hundreds of thousands of monthly transacting users. And then we reached another ceiling, which was like, actually, this is a market. The secondary market for NFTs is extremely inefficient. And we want a better user experience. And then that took us all the way back to fungible coins. But our continuous thread, and I think that's something that's unique to Zora, is that like, yes, we have a lot of speculative and like pure trading activity, but we actually have still just grown the number of people who are just essentially buy and hold only.
Right.
Which is like an interesting dynamic between the two. And I think we only could have got that from starting from one-of-ones through editions all the way to coins. Obviously a lot of twists and turns throughout the way, but like that's the kind of like high level journey. And I've thought about it a million times. I don't think there's a version of me that would have made the jump on the spot. I don't think the market would have been ready for it.
You almost needed meme coins to happen and just kind of blow open people's expectation or willingness to buy tokens and follow people on chain and the volume and all this stuff that's necessary for like real liquid markets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious about the decision making, and I think some of the criticism maybe that's been thrown your way in the last few weeks was just the impact those shifting models had on the creators and their expectations there. And I think moving from NFTs to coins, tokens, I guess maybe I'll use your language at some point here. Coins, was like a meaningful shift for certain. I think Zach XBT is probably the most vocal person about this. And so I think, from maybe a builder's perspective, I'd be really interested in knowing how and where you got conviction there. Were there mistakes made in how you communicated it, or was that very purposeful? Because I think there's a lot of, there's the famous Facebook story, right? As they shift to a feed, everybody hates it.
Yeah.
Stock drops, yada, yada, and yet it's like the most profitable innovation that they've kind of came out with. And making that decision from a leadership perspective is actually pretty hard. So
I think like you always want to be able to offer the most stable product and kind of platform that you possibly can. You can't offer a stable platform if you die. And I think it was if we had have not moved from like even one-of-ones to editions, I don't think people remember just how controversial that was at the time. And like we lived through what it's like to people found it dilutive and it was expanding, but it changed the dynamics quite a lot. And you basically have to make the trade-off. Well, we either make this evolution and disruption essentially, and that helps us keep, building and solving for this problem. And that's going to have some thrash in the short term, but it means that you're going to survive in the long term and you're going to be able to keep doing what you're doing. Versus if you just stay where you are and you're not willing to take on that disruption, then eventually you won't be able to be stable for your users because you'll just die as a product and a platform.
Right.
So what was the data that you're seeing that made you confident needing to like?
Yeah, I mean, like we from 2020, I can't remember precise. I think like our first editions tool was like May 2022, And it really started to hit its stride end of 2022. And then it was basically up only all through 2023, 2024. And, March and April, it like reached a peak. Like we were making millions of dollars in revenue a month pretty consistently. And then suddenly it reached a plateau that was just like very, very hard to break out of. And as we started like speaking to all of our users, particularly on the demand side, so like the collector side, it was just the user experience was super clunky because it was like, oh, hey, I see this post on Zora that I really like, but why can't I just double tap to buy this one? And it was because it was on the secondary market. And then it's like, oh, okay, like, do I now have to set a price or place a bid? How do I get in touch with the people who are selling it? They have ridiculous expectations and all that kind of stuff. So from a user experience standpoint, it was like, well, coins means that anyone on the internet can buy any amount at any time.
Right.
And just on that user experience point alone, it's like that is like why we should make a move to this model. And actually our UX didn't change that much, which I think to the Zach XBT point, like I think there was like some kind of confusion there where it was like, oh, Zora looks and feels the same, but the underlying token model and market model has like changed pretty substantially. But I think as we've been in this mode for 2 months now, and that type of confusion has largely gone away, and now it's more about like, well, why would I tokenize my content, and how do we make that easier and all that kind of stuff? So it's kind of shifted.
So I guess sitting here today, like how do you feel like this is just another step on this kind of continuous journey to go find the right mechanism, or do you feel like you're like close to the end state here?
It feels really, really, this is the closest it's ever felt. For sure. Like, our journey has basically been like iterating for like, what is the most effective way to tokenize a picture, essentially?
Yeah.
And then, what is the right token type? What is the right market model? And then what's the right user experience for all of that? And we've been pretty locked on the social context for like, the better part of like 2.5 years now. And that's been really working for us. The token type and market model obviously like directly linked.
Right.
But no, we've had like a pretty incredible growth with this new model, and then the user experience is just like so simple and fluid. Now I think most of the mechanism work is just actually iterations on, okay, how do we defend against sniping? How do we create the most efficient and orderly markets we possibly can, given the fact that it's coming from the same like creators all the time? And then now that we are starting to effectively tokenize at such a granular level, now what new user experiences can we build on top to simplify it and make it easy for more people to like participate, basically?
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think like if this goes and really works, do you think this model consumes meme coins, or do you think they?
Meme coins is such a broad category. Like if you were to look at, there's like AI agents is like a whole category of meme coins.
Yeah.
That's very different to
Governance tokens.
Governance tokens. Very different to political symbols like Peanut, or like Housecoin is almost like it's both like a political thing, and and then which is very different to trends like giblification and whatever. Like meme coins is such a broad term. So I think like the very specific slice we're going for is like, no, we think that you can make these markets extremely granular and will eventually find their way to the post level. And then maybe if you get there, we can start to create even more powerful versions of, like if you think about it, like giblification, it's a meme made of many, many posts that people are participating in.
Right.
So it's like, well, what happens and how can you like actually make these larger memes more powerful if you're starting to bring everything else that's making them valuable in the first place also on chain?
Yeah, it almost gives the more like belief kind of identity system meme coins a business model.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So I think there's such a wide open and interesting territory there that's actually quite simple to do, but it's all predicated on like, well, let's get the most granular things tokenized first and then build up. So I think we're getting visions of a very real future with what's happening, but I don't think the current state is like the end state. Yeah. And there's work to do to maximize what's going on here.
And do you think that actually unlocks the opportunity for like creator tokens or social tokens?
I think it'll unlock all of those things.
Right.
Yeah, because now it's like instead of a lot of the issues that those have had is that you tokenize too high up the stack too soon.
Yeah.
So that you create this thing and then it's like, wait, how do I reasonably drive value back into it? And then it puts a huge amount of expectations on the creator, and there's just like no feasible way to really do that. But it's like, well, if actually the output or like each unit is already being tokenized, it's trivial to start to bundle it because we have all of the, all of DeFi and all of these novel ways to bundle and tokenize things. So I assume we get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. but it's just about like solving this first, get the content piece right first. It's the atomic unit of the internet is a post. So
Right.
Start there.
It was kind of, let's say, intriguing to me, the defensiveness with which many people showed up on the timeline around the idea of meme coins being this thing that is established, defined by pump, and that there's no iteration to be done here, or that, like the further defining or nichification of those things is just like an outlandish idea. Do you think sort of like the unbundling of pump is a fair way to look at it? Like the idea that there's all these different subcategories, or do you think there's just...
I don't know if it's the unbundling. I love pump. I think it's like such a breakthrough product, and like it gets a lot of unnecessary hate, I think, for like what is a really simple and like, great insight and awesome experience. I think it's obviously there is a model there that can be applied in more places. And like, I think it's true that you can use pump for theoretically everything. But I think what we're already starting to see in the market now is like, no, maybe if you want to tokenize a particular type of thing, the user experience and the context and the underlying market model is probably going to get more specialized to that particular thing being tokenized. So obviously there's a lot of similarities in the model where it's like create a coin that is tradable and liquid. But I think the details of even like how our markets work and are structured of like getting increasingly divergent from anything else in the space. So I think you could look at it from like the unbundling way, but I don't know. I think it's blurry, or I don't think it's that productive.
It seems kind of lazy, I would say.
Exactly.
So if you think that, so we're like close to the working mechanism or like the end state of the mechanism, which I think I very much agree with. So I guess like presumably then your focus turns to actually like growing and scaling this network. And I see kind of two core challenges there. One is obviously a distribution challenge. Like how do you go get way more people to know about Zora and care about Zora? And I also feel like there's a big kind of like consumer behavior education, kind of social norm thing you're going to be fighting as well. So I'm curious how you, like being here, knowing you need to go scale this network, how you think you go tackle those two things.
Yeah, I guess on the second point of like the social construct, like I think we've already made a huge amount of progress there. Like we've been in the market for 2 months, and I think a lot of the people that were previously using Zora, who I was like unsure if they'd be comfortable using it or not, are like just using it like they were before.
Right.
And it's not coming with like the insane expectations that people would associate with a coin, because we put so much energy into making it very clear that it's like, this coin is just the post. There's not going to be a dev or CTO that's going to do anything. It's like you know what you're buying. This is the picture, or the video. And then, in terms of growing the network, so it's like, we're putting a huge amount of effort into our app, our mobile app, and basically trying to find the extreme end of the spectrum where users don't really need to know or care that they're coins or how to trade.
Right.
The beauty of building on the coins model is that we're tapping into a universe of trading tools and platforms that already do that stuff for the pro traders. Our thing is like, okay, how can we expand the number of people who are posting but also trading and not really having to think about it too much? Right. And that's how we expand the market and basically like build our distribution in the app, which is like, it's relatively good. It's very early, certainly better than it was this time 6 months ago. But that's where all of our energy is, because that's clearly where the upside is, I think, for us. Yeah.
And to get more people trading, like, is that a language thing? Like, I think you've talked about before how like buy sell is kind of awkward. Like maybe there's some other.
Well, no, we just use buy sell. Like so for example, in the mobile app, you just double tap and you bought. And it's like, that is so different to seeing a swap UI, inputting how much, what percentage of my balance am I going to use, and pressing go. It's literally just like picture good, double tap.
Right.
Like, that's a behavior that people have been doing on the internet for like a very, very long time. And it carries very well. Like that's a trait that people are buying. And I think now it's like, okay, how can we do that same level of ease and abstraction on the selling side? So I'm just like scrolling, double tapping, and then I'm getting notifications because, something went up.
Right.
And I didn't even have to think about it. So like we're thinking about how to just basically, it's like, how do you make everyone a trader without them being like, they don't have to be slinging it on deck screener or
Right.
Photon or whatever. It's actually like, no, it's just an implicit behavior that's part of the
How do you think you
experience.
facilitate that selling experience?
We've got some ideas that we're going to
Okay.
be shipping, but like I think that's the high level way that we
I
think
think
about
we
it.
could ask and see how many questions we ask that he won't answer.
Yeah.
I feel like that might be a good measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like we're in this like real special moment, especially in consumer crypto. I think crypto more generally, where the things that we've wanted, somewhat clear regulation, maybe more clear regulation, the institutions coming in, expanding the scale or the size of those who are able to purchase without maybe needing to have a wallet.
Yeah.
And even the Instagram sort of news, I think, or the Fortnite news, I think we got to give Epic credit here, sort of thing. So all these things coming together, and I think exactly what you're talking about. There's this sort of growing consumer desire to participate in it, but we've traditionally had these sort of crypto people and normies, I guess, is sort of the language there. And I think the idea, the promise of being able to reach into normie markets is so big, and yet the practical reality of trying to break into those, given where we have been, regulations, tech, et cetera, have been pretty limited. And so I'm curious how that experience is now as you sort of reach out to creators or people.
Yeah.
Is there a big shift there? Are people more welcoming to it? And then I'm curious if there's any sort of insights around how you found talking to a wider audience and being successful at it.
To give you a sense of like how far we've come. So when we were onboarding creators back in 2020, 2021, it would be like a 30-minute Zoom, and we would have to onboard them to a MetaMask. We'd have to send them ETH so they could pay for gas. We'd then have to walk them through what that wallet is, connect to this website, approve these scary looking transactions. And it was like the onboarding was just incredibly tedious. Now it's just like, hey, download this app, put in your email, done. And that's only possible because we've got networks that are scaled, we've got smart wallet infrastructure, and all of the kind of really critical pieces of tooling are now like easy to use as an app developer. And then, when we do a lot of manual outreach still on like TikTok and Instagram, and sometimes there's an allergic reaction, but we actually find that that's usually a good thing, because it's an opportunity for us to be like, yeah, you're totally right in how you feel about this, but here's what we think is interesting, and there's powerful stuff here. We've made it very easy, and here's what we're trying to do, and it converts pretty well. Our like messaging's a little bit more simpler. It's like, hey, you can post and like get paid. And then they'll ask questions like, oh, okay, it's using crypto and all that kind of stuff. But it's worked better than it ever has. And now we've got a user experience that it's like, there's basically no friction. It feels like any other app would, which I think is a huge deal. So those two things.
Well, it actually just unlocks the potential for viral adoption of this thing, right?
Yeah.
You have some posts that pop off, they get shared on TikTok, and
exactly,
it can actually convert into downloads and buyers pretty effectively now, whereas like there's just no fucking chance 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's no chance. Well, there obviously was some subset of people, because the incentive of crypto is that there's so much money being made that people will jump through those hoops. But now it's like, that barrier's being lowered. I will say though, it's like, when our philosophy on this is like, we want to turn normies into natives, which is just like, it's not, we want to hide and abstract everything and there's no crypto at all.
Right.
It's like, we think that everyone will be a crypto person in the same way that everyone now is an internet person. It's just about like, how do you lower that barrier to entry and give them the tools they need to, to use the thing properly, versus like being like kind of coddling and shielding them away and like hiding everything. It's like, we are upfront. That's like, we say like, it's a social network where every post is a coin.
Right.
And it's very intentional. Like, we want to open the door and then make it easy, but like, they have to walk through the door.
Right. Yeah. It's a UX problem, not a, like, I think so many people are like, we're going to abstract crypto away so much to the point where like, you're not even going to know that this app is anything different than anything that has come before.
Maybe some of that.
I think like there is some, like, I don't think that path is wrong, actually.
Yeah.
I think we've just found that it's more, you get more cut through if you like talk about what the new thing is and you're more honest about it. Because you also don't want people to come in and then be like, oh shit, I just used crypto and I didn't want to. And then that creates like it's a new type of churn. There's some balance. Like if you're building like a payments company or something like that, then you probably don't need to talk about it. But I think in our case, where it's like, it's a new consumer thing that relies on crypto, then maybe we should talk about it.
I did a test last night outside the event that I was at, and there was a steady stream of young people walking up, mostly women who were trying to go to this bar, but it was closed for a private event. And I said, hey, just mention that you want to talk about crypto and they'll let you in. And the looks I got and the speed of which these women walked off was like, we got a lot of work to do here still.
There's a lot of work to do for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like the having some level set around sort of some of your metrics and like what sort of scale you guys are at is maybe valuable here, because I think most people haven't checked out your Dune from the conversations I've had.
Yeah, I think so. We launched this coins iteration. I think it's a little over 2 months ago. Might be right on 2 months ago. We've had
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, it's like 1.9 million traders. I think it's like 110,000 creators. And then I think it's like $225 million in volume or something like that since then. Yeah. And yeah, I think like to compare that to the NFT minting experience just before then, like I think the December or January, it was something like 100,000 monthly transacting users. Which is still pretty good. Like we had like very solid scale with that NFT model, but this has obviously made it much more fluid.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think people are always surprised to hear that we have like that level of activity, but it's also built on the back of like 2 years of like solid distribution from the NFT model. Yeah.
So I'd love to get into a bit more of the crypto bullshit right now.
Sure.
And I want to talk about your token launch, but I think speaking a little bit more about the mechanism that is embedded, like the market creation mechanism within Zora is probably interesting. I think it's still this area that we kind of have a shocking lack of innovation in, or at least there's like these sort of established ways of launching a token. And my sense is like that we still have a long way to go there.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe, I don't know where you want to start there, either in explaining it or the reasons behind it.
Yeah. So the Zora protocol very simply is like it's a factory that outputs tokens, and then we kind of group Doppler, which is like helps with primary distribution, and then Uniswap. And then we have a whole bunch of rewards infrastructure that basically manages the LP fees and distributes them to the creator, the platforms that find the trades, and then obviously Zora as well. What we're trying to do is actually get our starting market cap as close to zero as possible, because obviously the like most content on the internet is worth non-zero, but it's worth very close to zero.
Right.
So if we're going to unlock efficient markets for every piece of content, we need to unlock very, very like basically micro markets, and then figure out how to like basically simultaneously have real price discovery happening at very low value, but then also have a path to this is going to get to enough liquidity to sustain viral breakouts that can reach, extreme levels of scale.
Right.
So there's a lot of work to do there. So we use Doppler as being amazing to help with like that really low starting stage. And then obviously it's using Uniswap as well under the hood. Now we're migrating to Uniswap v4, and there's a lot more customizability and things that we can do to make that even better and defend against sniping, because obviously if you've got extremely low starting market caps, you don't want someone to be able to buy the majority of the supply for free. So there's like some really fun dynamics and mechanisms that Austin and the Doppler team have been working with us on to help do that. So that's where like all of our energy is spent at that level. And it's very different to, I think, the kind of standard token launcher model that is like, at scale at the moment in a lot of places, which is a much high starting market cap and just focusing on that top end. Yeah.
It felt like largely that's what happened with the base coin was some people were able to come in early, get a ton of the supply, and then, we know what happens after that happens with any coin. So it feels like, is the current mechanism more optimized for the smaller markets and you need to go figure out how to make it work for the larger markets, or?
Yeah, we're kind of in a messy middle where it's like, it can get to the top end scale at some trade off for the lower scale, but it's like low enough that you can buy like large percentages for not very much. So yeah, that's what our like kind of current iteration is is striking a balance of. So we should have some things coming out there in the next few weeks that'll make a big impact there. Nice. But it works pretty well in the meantime. Yeah.
So, I'm just going to ask like the big question.
That's what I was going to ask too. So let's go.
Okay. So why launch a token now?
Yeah, great question. We
Thank you.
When we were very high confidence in the coins model going through that. And as we were road mapping out the next year, I guess at the very high level, we think the most winning version of the thing we're trying to do will have a token at its core. And we also think that like the way that the like how you drive value into tokens and build things around it is an unsolved problem. So it's basically like, well, how do you get a token into the hands of the community out in the market with no expectations, and then not committing to, you know, a DAO and a foundation and a very kind of restrictive and tightly defined model, and basically just put it out there and create the surface area to very rapidly experiment and find the most effective version of that system. So we started that process like end of last year, and we knew that we wanted to basically like be building this and like have that kind of that part of the system. And then we also have like we just launched Zora pairs earlier in the week, so we moved away from pairing every coin with ETH to Zora. So that's our kind of like our first like iteration and idea of playing like how to get it integrated into, you know, the product. And then it just kind of they were kind of like the main two reasons.
Would it have been beneficial or a huge detriment to have a token, say, a year ago and to go through the shifts that you've gone through?
It's a good question. I think if we had have done it in the like DAO Foundation Labs triumvirate, it probably would have been very bad because it's very inflexible and you get like locked into a model. If we had have done it the way we did it now, which is like we just launched a meme coin and, you know, the token itself has no inherent utility or anything like that, then it probably would have been fine. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the market's having a hard time wrapping its head around how we're doing it now. Back then, it probably would have looked even more insane. I will say though, like if I was starting a brand new project from scratch today, I think the first literal thing I would do would be to start the token. Like,
okay, I'm on board.
Yeah,
on board.
But I don't know if I am, man.
Well, but
it depends what you're building.
Yeah. I think what's really important is that like you have to be. I don't think you can come out and be like, here's this roadmap and, you know, all these things we're going to do and set extremely unreasonable expectations. I think it needs to be like, this is worth nothing. We have no idea if this is going to work or not. We are trying to build something on-chain native, and like we want to figure out how to like get that connected to the token or not, and we're going to experiment.
Yeah.
And then I would probably hold back a huge percentage of the supply. I would be using illiquidity as a feature, as not as a bug.
Yeah.
And then get to work.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's where the world's moving to. It's just we still have this very antiquated and skeuomorphic model of like what a token is and how it should work, and we view it as the last thing that should happen, or something that's only happening very late. Versus, I think it should actually be like in the
second to last thing. It's token and then product market fit, right? That's how we do it. That's it.
I mean, I think launching a token into like peak attention and hype is just impossible, and setting yourself up to fail. So
exactly.
I think I'm very bought into the idea of like,
I agree with that.
Early, let the people who are there and care.
But the models people are using for that are very wrong, right? Because we saw a whole bunch go through pump. I think believe is a thing right now. Like, doesn't the mechanism underneath that need to be very different if you're trying to have a long-term view on something?
I think like, I actually don't think anyone knows what the right answer to that is.
Yeah.
It might just be you create the token and actually 100% of the supply is just sitting there and you're manually distributing it as the founder to people who are working on it.
Again,
and
right.
it's just like, it's actually, and then it's all locked up for like, you know, years. And there is like a long time horizon on it.
Do you even get the benefit of a token if you're doing it like that? Like isn't part of that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think like getting that out of the way, and then it's like, it's there, and then you're not dealing with, you know, all of the kind of mess that comes with people trying to farm and move around what's going on. I think it does. That would at least be the iteration I would want to try.
Well, there is. I mean, I think we probably had a conversation like this probably 4 years ago, right? And there's actually a big difference when you do give somebody a token in the sense of their connection to the thing. So there's clear value there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the way that we're looking at it right now is just like, oh, this is how. I think a lot of the ones we're seeing right now are like, I have a hard time getting attention and breaking through. I'm going to go do this as like a growth tactic or something like that. And I think that maybe is a bit bad. But I mean, there is sort of like these two ways we know how to launch tokens apparently, and God forbid we sort of break out of those, right? This is low float, high FDV token, which has some challenges, but clearly works for many cases, even if it's down only for a while.
Josh, works for some parties.
Yeah. clear yes works for some parties. But I mean, I think right, that's probably fair. And then we have these meme coin launches, right? And then my sense is the way that you guys came at it was kind of in the middle.
Well, yeah, I guess like, so for us, it was, we didn't want to do the DAO Labs Foundation triumvirate, and we didn't want to do an offshore entity. We wanted to basically like figure out how could we do this from the US directly from labs, keep
From
it very
New
simple.
York.
Yeah. And then also offer like we had like 2.5 million addresses that we needed to airdrop to. We also wanted to have the best experience for that possible. So it was like no KYC was like a big thing. And then managing all of the tax liabilities and like basically doing the work for it's like, well, if we want to see more US companies doing this from the US, and I like that version of the future, how can we do that in a way that, how can we like help kind of chart that path and set a blueprint for it? And then, make it easy such that we can keep building and iterating on what we're doing and not taking a big shot on like one particular model or setting, unreasonable expectations what's going on. We were just very honest. We're like, here's a token. There's no utility in this token. It's functionally a meme coin. Like, we're going to have fun with it. And now it's like, we're already starting to build it into our product and ecosystem, and others are too. Like I saw I think Tally launched like a community Zora DAO using the token, and like because it's so open, actually the community can start to integrate it as well, which I think is like a subtle but like important point as well. Yeah.
Do you have you're a big like language guy, meme guy, you like kind of creating new terms that show something's new, but also like encapsulates kind of all the complexity potentially that's with under it. Do you have like a word for how to talk about the Zora token or like this type of token?
It's a good question. I just call it it's just Zora.
It's just
Zora.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does it fit into the A16Z definition of the 7 tokens that we can have?
Yeah, I think
there's
there's so much to figure out, and obviously like there's a million different points of view for like how we could do it. This was as a team has been building for 5 years, and we could have launched this token I think many times over in the past, and it was like, no, I want the model that isn't setting unreasonable expectations. We can do it from the US and actually lets us build. So I think there are other models that people are throwing around that's a little bit more structured and maybe works in some cases, but I don't have a word for it yet. Maybe I should. But maybe
look forward to your next
maybe
essay.
It's just called the Zora model in the future. Who knows?
There we go. Yeah. I think one of the implications of what you're building that I'm fascinated by is this idea of like markets is the new algorithm, and just kind of the way that fundamentally changes the incentives for what types of content get created potentially. And also just actually, like, I think you talked about it in your podcast with Jackson, it'll actually just like appropriately value attention. Like it actually becomes more expensive to take over someone's attention if you have these market-based algorithms. So I'm curious if you could just talk a bit more about that, because I think it's actually pretty profound.
Yeah. So if we like want to zoom all the way out, I think like the internet is kind of like half complete. There's this like famous quote from Stuart Brand. It's like the information wants to be free, but it has a second half that not many people know, which is like information also wants to be expensive, and that tension will not go away.
Right.
And the best we've been able to do up until this point is like you can have free information within the walled garden of a social media platform. And then that social media platform is monetized and powered by an at-scale ad exchange, which is effectively pricing and monetizing attention in the back end. The problem with that is that information, has a hard time breaking out of those walls. So like maybe it doesn't well, that's one problem. But the second is the way that information is distributed is through these like black box algorithms that obviously those companies are optimizing to maximize their revenue, but it comes at the expense of like, well, what should people be seeing? How is that being like, is that algorithm aligned with me or not? Like who's controlling it? Like what's going on? And then obviously none of that marginal value is going to the end user. Obviously social media platforms are being pushed into that direction now where they're having to start to like push that revenue. YouTube's probably the best at this, but like other platforms are much more behind. So it's like, well, what if we, one, content does have some inherent value. Crypto is very good at creating and pricing that value. So one, that you coin it, create a market for it. But then if you're seeing an increasing amount of content that is tokenized, then the market is essentially an open, public, adversarial way to figure out like, well, what is valuable content and why, and what should we be paying attention to, who's valuing it, what addresses are involved, like what's going on here. And you essentially get, I think, like a much more open way to, see what's important on the internet. So instead of having like, big black box algorithms that are kind of showing it, you actually have them compete maybe in an open market to discover like, well, what do people want to consume? What do people value?
Right.
And yeah, I think that like basically restructures how social media works. But I think it's actually the most ideal form of the internet, because now you've got a model that is literally, instead of trying to hold information in, if you turn it into a coin, the literal incentive mechanism is to spread it as far and wide as fast as possible, right. Which like just feels ideal. And that just feels like how the internet should probably work on some dimension.
And even on the creator side too, right? Like if the way you're actually capturing the most possible value out of this thing is to not just get people to consume your content, but actually think it's valuable or important.
Exactly.
Like you're incentivized to actually, or you have to go create good, valuable content instead of just kind of clickbaity things, because once you capture attention, you've extracted all the value you need to extract it.
Yeah, exactly. Like clickbait works because you just have to hook them with a single title, and then they go to the page and then they're like, oh, well, they just monetize it, but you got no value back. Versus this model is like, well, you consume it first, and then you're like, well, now do I think more people are going to find this interesting or not? Do I like it? And then, there's a much higher barrier to entry to capture the value there.
Yeah, so I want to get in the way of this philosophizing stuff. And also shout out to Jackson Dahl, Dialectic Podcast, because I think you go into nearly 3 hours in a lovely, rambling, cohesive conversation. And maybe we can get back to it at the end, but I don't want to leave this thread of the token launch. And maybe the question is like, what do you think you got right and what do you think you got wrong?
For
just the launch of the Zora token. Or maybe, if it's not wrong, maybe that's not there iterations or learnings from it so far.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything I would, for anything that was in our control, I don't think I would necessarily change. I think like we were definitely a little bit caught off guard by the spotlight and the kind of fanfare that was like happening around Zora in the week like leading up to Zora, and that definitely I would have preferred to have not had that, just because just it put like a whole bunch of stress and tension, and then also I think people were just learning about Zora for the first time in a way that like people were just confused, and we're still pretty early in getting this version of the product out there. But the site, we didn't have any downtime on the site once it went live. Our like claim rate percentage is like very, very high. And it's out there and it's done, and now we can like focus.
I mean, we got pretty intimate with Zora data through the Enjoy token. And I just remember being like, how the hell are you guys going to make sense of this? Because it was multiple contracts, multiple eras, multiple different sort of contexts people are participating in.
Chains.
It took us months. It was, so it was like, it was 2.5 million addresses. We had like 7 distinct versions of a protocol on multiple different networks. And then obviously you then have to make sure that you're not overweighting. We had so many we had like developers built on Zora who were referring things. We had everyone who was minting and collecting, people who are creating, and everyone has a role in making that ecosystem works. And, I think there's always, you wish you could give everyone everything, but you do have to make those trade-offs and try and smooth it out. And I think like we're proud of what we did there, but obviously we can't make everyone happy.
Well, I complained to Jacob about my St. Fame shirt getting barely any love. And so he's like, you got to, I mean, my sense was that you're always going to piss somebody off doing that. But I was kind of shocked by that. I thought it was going to be more of a challenge, just knowing the complexity behind it compared to, and I'm sure there's people who were like, no.
I think people were still getting so rabbit holed in like, what's a content coin? Why are we calling this? And like there are actually other issues that people were still getting caught up in that I think there was definitely there was a lot of love, but there was a lot of hate and animosity as well that was just looking for anything to grab onto. Right. And I think, surprisingly the distribution itself, was largely good.
I feel like there's a question that the internet would want me to ask her. I'm just going to ask it right now. Did you coordinate with Coinbase and Jesse around that whole thing?
No, that was a wonderful surprise. I mean, Base and Jesse had been using Zora for the better part of 2 years now. So like they've been posting on Zora for quite some time. I know Jesse had been working on trying to get Coinbase over the hump of, in this new coins model, like doing that. But no, if I could have chosen when that happened, I would have said, a month or so after the token and, we've got everything settled and we've got a few more iterations in. But yeah, we got a little bit surprised by that. But we'll take it because, it was a lot of attention. We've seen like a lot of growth and discussion, and I think it's like accelerate a lot of things. But it wasn't planned, and that would not be how I would plan it if I was going to.
So why didn't you launch the token on Zora Network?
Yeah, great question. So Zora, we launched the network in 2023. It's about a month before Base, actually. So this is when ETH as an ecosystem generally was like in earnest, finally moving to L2s. And we didn't know how it was going to play out. So we took a multi-chain strategy, which is like, we're going to support any reasonable L2 in ETH, and then we'll see what happens. And even though we had set Zora as the default, we found that the level of traction and activity we were seeing on Base was outcompeting our own network because they'd done so much work on the network effects and infrastructure integrations and just bringing liquidity on Base. So when we were moving to the coins model, we were like, we don't think that we want to support every chain. We're going to make a big bet on one chain and just focus. And just based on all of the data we were seeing, we chose Base. Zora Network still exists. We're going to maintain it and run it for as long as Zora runs, and everything that's on there you can still see in the Zora product. But for the coins model, we wanted to commit to Base, and then given that's where all of our activity is, we wanted to put a token there as well. Yeah.
And is there a intention at all or a focus at all to push more of your activity onto Zora Network, or
no? We're all in on Base on the foreseeable future. Yeah.
So you had an announcement yesterday that you referenced earlier, this idea that now all these tokens, the content coins, doesn't quite roll off my tongue just yet. But
yeah, I don't like the term. I don't think I like the term content coins. That kind of came out of the Base experience, but I do think it is helpful in a way because it's like, hey, like it's a very specific thing that's being coined, but I just like calling them coins.
Yeah.
Every post is a coin. Yeah.
So the announcement yesterday was that all the base pairs, so basically the pairs of each of these markets, the hundreds of thousands of markets that are spinning up, will be denominated in Zora. And I think intuitively at a high level, that seems valuable for the token. I wonder if you can get into a little bit more of the details behind the decision there and what sort of impact do you hope that has? Yeah,
so from like a user standpoint, that means that creator rewards are now in Zora. So like we really like that as kind of as like a market-driven incentive, which is just like, okay, like we've got this token that exists out in the ecosystem. Obviously, we've got a large budget that we've allocated for incentives, but it was like, well, what's a product and market-driven way we can do that that's automated? So now when creators are posting, they're getting rewarded in Zora, which we think is like a nice flywheel. And then more high level, it's, we have to make a choice of like what we want to pair it with. And it's like, well, we've mostly abstracted, we have actually entirely abstracted gas away. And most new users don't really know or care about ETH. There's obviously a huge amount of people, of existing users that spend ETH. But our user experience didn't change at all. Like you can go to Zora and you can pay in ETH, pay in any coin. I'm just more interested in like, the unit of account seems open to me. So it's like money is being kind of unbundled by crypto at a very high level. So you've got store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. And I think most people have always assumed that the L1 asset, the underlying asset, will be that for their network. But it feels like there's an open and interesting territory to actually experiment with that. And it's like, because we're originating this coin supply and we've like abstracted the complexity of routing for users, it's like, well, why not set your own community meme coin as that, and we're going to play with it and kind of see what happens. And yeah, I think we've originated something like 80 or 85% of all new pools on Uniswap since we launched coins. So it's like, well, there is some kind of interesting network effect that I think that we can cultivate there by setting Zora as that base currency in our ecosystem. So
I think it's worth double clicking on that unit of account thing, because I think there's so much, I think seen in the timeline tribalism driven by what assets you hold and how you identify. And so much of that is at the infrastructure layer right now, which I think to anybody, like, I mean, are you Microsoft versus Windows, or Windows versus Mac, maybe, are you like a Linux guy or not? But it's nowhere near at this.
But even those are consumer products, right? It's like, yeah.
So
tying your
that
identity.
tribalism has existed at the network level.
Right. And we've done all this work on abstraction, which, and I think this idea that the way that these L1s become valuable is because there are valuable things to go buy on the network and to hold and to trade, right? And so ETH had its moment through, and God willing will have its moment again. Solana had its moment through, and God willing will have its moment again, right? Both driven by this sort of demand. And so, in a world where we are abstracting this, and in a world where we're seeing, the growth in fees captured by consumer products growing versus the infrastructure, it feels like some of the fundamental beliefs that we actually have around how value is created in crypto, which obviously change quite quickly, are challenged in this model where really if you own the relationship with the customer, if you're originating new assets at the app layer, why the hell would you not want to be the unit of account for that as well? And then what does that mean for these sort of infrastructure layers?
Yeah, maybe that tribalism now can come up to the app layer, and that there's a very simple model that actually doesn't impact the user experience that much at all, but is quite elegant, at least for anyone issuing coins or like token launchpads. So I think I don't know the answer here. I'm like, I can see the path, and I'm like, well, we could have picked any coin in the ecosystem to like pair with it. So it's like, well, if we've launched this meme coin and it's out there, why not use that one? So yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens.
You get to be in the liquidity driving business now.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So you have been a fairly prolific writer. I think you kind of have these moments, perhaps, where you like to share stuff. And actually, before we sat down here today, we were talking about Nouns DAO, and I think maybe hyperstructures are the other one that kind of really broke through. And my sense is maybe kind of wrong, ultimately. So I'm curious, just maybe how you either using one or both of those, and the story of Zora, how you sort of changed your thinking. Yeah,
I actually I've added a note onto the original article because, I think for hyperstructures, there were kind of core parts of it. It was like you can have a permissionless protocol, and the parts that I think were wrong and I disagree with is that it could be free and valuable due to, I was very wedded to the Uniswap model at the time, which was like you have a DAO and a fee switch and a zero fee protocol, and that maybe that dynamic means you can have a free protocol and a valuable DAO still. I'm not convinced by that now. I think the overarching premise, though, of that was like, hey, the breakthrough innovation here is that you can have permissionless protocols that anyone can access, and you can build expansive business models into them that were probably very different to how traditional software works. So that's the part of it I still like stand by as very interesting, and like that's novel and obviously very obvious to anyone in the space. Like, permissionless protocols are a huge breakthrough, but I think after that was like 2022, I think when I wrote that. And I don't think the free and valuable points I was making at the time like really hold up anymore.
And did your Nouns DAO experience lead to this desire not to have a Labs Foundation DAO structure, or?
I think that was like a very hands-on experience of like what DAOs, like that was such a pure instance of a DAO that like had capital, was adversarial, and it had all of the pieces that I think was a really good shot at what a DAO could look like. And I was like, okay, I don't think this would work for people who are trying to build a product and a protocol out in the space. So it definitely kind of informed like the combination of seeing how it's worked for other teams, and then like Nouns DAO, I was like, I don't think the DAO model, I'm not convinced by it for at least the early stages. Maybe it gets figured out in the future, but at least not today.
For sure, for early stage, it's playing on extra hard mode. What are the essays that you have in drafts right now?
That's a good question. I've got one that I've been sitting on for ages called Local Maximums. I think I've
seen that pitch. You got to share that. It is.
So that was like a town hall presentation I gave a couple of years ago at Zora, which is basically like, how do you structurally build a culture and navigate around local maximums as a company so that you don't get disrupted and die? And it's like,
that's the second slide. The first was so you don't die.
yeah. And it's basically like, how do you know you're in one, how to break out of them, and then what are the challenges and how can you do that so that you're going into it eyes wide open and give yourself a shot of like iterating and growing.
I like the internet to know that I've been trying to get Jacob to release this for at least a year.
Yeah, so I got that one. Big little details. That's like a term I love using, where it's just like there's always a list of things that could be shipped in less than a day. That if you just focus on those big little details, they actually compound and add up very quickly. And it's like how do you keep an eye out for those and make sure you're paying attention to them, because they can actually have like a huge impact. They're like the two most baked. There are other like.
Why haven't you shipped them yet?
I've been too busy.
Yeah,
been too busy.
What are you
yeah.
talking about? This thing's marketing itself. You know, the token's out there. You've exit liquidity. Let's go on to your next thing.
Yeah, well, I think part of it's also been I don't know. There's part of me that I'm just like I kind of really view the Zora product as the essay at the moment, where I'm like, it's one thing to like kind of talk and like and like write a big game and kind of have these opinions, but I feel like I need to kind of express them and make sure that Zora is working on some dimension, and I'll feel more. That might be a bad constraint.
No, I think it's. I mean, there's so even in a well written post, there's so many assumptions or things that haven't been tested yet, and so being able to test and prod is maybe the way you actually get the insights from, especially these more complex coordination games.
Exactly. So, the product is the essay for the meantime.
Product is the essay.
So outside of obviously the Zora opportunity, are there any big opportunities you see within consumer crypto that you're surprised no one's running at?
That's a good question. I don't think I have. My answers are probably going to be like extremely consensus. Like I think prediction markets have always been fascinating to me. Like that's where the Zora name actually came from. Like back in 2017, like it was a name for a search engine for the future built on aggregating like Augur markets. And I love what Polymarket's doing. I think there's like, I want to see some more on-chain native user-generated approaches, and I think there's a lot more that can be done there. And then I think eventually someone can build like a search engine for the future if there's enough of these markets. I think that's like a cool thing. But
what does that look like?
Well, it's like imagine there's millions of prediction markets. Then you've basically how you can discover them. And it's like, well, you can just search for like anything. It's like what's happening? What is society's best guess of what's going to happen in the future for this one particular thing?
I mean, you could almost look at what you're building as a form of prediction market.
It definitely is. Yeah. I think one of my favorite things I've written was I think I called them prophecy markets.
Yeah.
Which is like, well, prediction markets are mostly zero sum. You need a counterparty to instantiate the trade, basically. Right. But it's like, well, what would the positive sum version of that look like? And I was using NFTs at the time, but I think meme coins are actually like much, much closer to that, which they do function as a form of prediction market. And the beauty of that is you don't need a counterparty to instantiate the trade. Like I don't need to bet and go find someone to make it. I can like go put the thing out there, and if it's right, then maybe then eventually the market catches on and picks it up.
Right.
So, I had that realization too. I was like, oh wait, Zora is actually still kind of in that direction. It's just in a more of a native form that I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see like adjacent, if you think of token launchers as like a category that has obviously really hit or been enduring for some degree? I think Zora fits into that at the high level. Do you see opportunities, like how might you look at opportunities in that area?
Go find a thing that's valuable that is not able to capture it effectively using the traditional financial system, and then figure out the most effective way to tokenize it, create a market for it, and then whatever the user experience that is required to make that happen.
We talk a lot about social context being important. I think you use that as a way of sort of describing Zora early on, and that there are probably, the positioning and the definitions and the user experience actually plays in a big way into like what the expectations are. And my sense is that we talk about it a lot in the idea of like sports, et cetera. It's like a very different dynamic for a different user there. It seems like there's a lot of pockets like that. Is that a good way to look at it, or would you sort of approach
That's definitely one dimension as well, which is like, we put a lot of effort into making sure that it's just the picture on Zora. It's just a piece of media, and it's like there's not a dev or a CTO, or there isn't going to be someone full-time hustling to try and like make number go up. It's truly just like, view this as a prediction market on the picture, essentially. So I think setting that context does have a big impact, because that frames what people are. That's going to inform like their actions, basically. So I think that's one variable, but there's like, the user experience for tokenizing an AI agent looks very different to the user experience for like tokenizing a YouTube video.
I think it's a piece that crypto Twitter often misses, because we're all just hanging out on deck screener, so see everything as being the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the willingness for people to post content on Zora versus the strong resistance to creating a meme coin on pump.fun is, I think, underappreciated
for sure
today.
Yeah.
So that like the user experience and the social norms you can build in at the product level, I think, are just going to be so important in the behavior or like norms around these tokens.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, you're right. It can be, that actually is like a big little detail that can like make or break what you're doing. Which is why like we pay attention and put so much energy into it. It's like, how do you create that context so people can just post? And then there's obviously market education to do on the other side, so people aren't like, oh, I see coin, it must be this thing. It's actually like, no, there's like more granularity here, and not every coin is the same.
So in true Internet Explorers fashion, we're clearly over time and could probably talk for much longer. And I want to maybe take the last few minutes here to think about how you think about the future of Zora. And I know you have held a lot back, I think. My guess is, as we get into, there's probably a roadmap there in your brain, and and so I'm curious, like, whatever you're willing to share, or how people should be thinking about where you guys are putting attention, and how this should shift over time.
Yeah, I think I mentioned some of it earlier, which is just like continuing to iterate at the core market level. So it's like, there's something raw there and working, but how do we make it more efficient and orderly? So you can defend against sniping and just have the most effective price discovery you can at very, very low values. So
is that far away, or is that close?
No, it's in progress.
Cool.
Then at the app level, like the core market mechanism is like, we're like pretty happy with it, but now it's like, okay, in the app, how do we make this as seamless and as magical as possible? And then also there's just some like really fundamental gaps in our like social experience that we should be filling in. So even just something like as simple as DMs or things that people would expect to see in a social app that people are always asking us for. And it's like, okay, now we're this level we're feeling more confident in, we can like dedicate some more energy to the core social experience. And then, it's just simplifying. Like, I think I felt some gravity in like the core Zora app actually getting like really, really trader heavy, and like feeling like we needed to, I was like, oh, everyone's going to be a trader, therefore add trading things. But I think we've kind of flipped that. It's like, well, no, how can you turn everyone into a trader without them actually having to do that, and then have some cool abstractions to like get there. So
because that's interesting, because so much of this, where you've ended up, is driven by seeking new demand, and recognizing the demand side of this is like the most important thing. And that demand side generally in crypto is represented by traders. And so in my mind, I was like, is there going to be a pro version of this, right? Like, I mean, you see maybe what OpenSea did, and Blur and that sort of movement, and catering to that market. But it sounds like that's.
I think that there may be room for us to do that. I think crypto already is the pro version. Like all of those tools already exist to some extent. And I think we'll only be successful if we're expanding the number of people who are trading and expanding the demand side. I don't think that's necessarily going to be having Zora skinned versions of, Dex Screener or whatever. It's like, no, there is room to have a way, way, way more simple experience that makes it much easier for people to participate and benefit from using it. So, we're trying to find the extreme opposite end of like what's out there in the market, basically.
How much do you think social graphs matter in the future of the Zora product versus kind of pure market based discovery?
That's a good question. I think there'll there'll probably be new stuff that shows up there where it's like, oh, maybe people want to follow, like the market will be an input into people's decision for who they're following or not. Like I think there's a lot of like people just follow the most profitable wallets, for example, and they don't care who it is. So it's there'll probably be things around that. I mean, the social graph is pretty useful for us in helping people discover and what shows up in their feed and all that type of stuff. So it'll definitely be important. But I'd imagine the market piece is actually the most important. At least that's where I think that's the novel and net new thing. So it's like if we can solve that and then build emergent things on top of it, then that'll probably be the most important thing.
Right.
But I mean, who knows?
Like you don't necessarily need my like 10 closest friends to get onto Zora for me to see value in it.
Well, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that might be true, but it's hard to say. You could go like pure TikTok end of the spectrum and you don't need to follow anyone and you can kind of figure it out. Or you can go more to trad social side and actually like who your friends are is like the core part of the experience. But
none of those popular apps right now care about your followers so much or following. It's all algo. So I feel like
exactly. There's some, I think like where that changes is with like DMs and stuff like that. So you can have a social experience around this. Like you're sharing and discussing things as you're experiencing them. But I don't think we've cracked that code, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, man. Well, anything else that you want to share before we move on? Do we get into all the things? We asked all of our questions, right?
I think we did pretty good.
I think actually planned for it.
What I would say is like I think a lot of people's first experience or first knowledge of hearing Zora is from the past couple of weeks of crypto Twitter. I would say like it's very easy to just assume that those opinions exactly you could just inherit them. I would say just download the app and try it because I think it's a pretty cool experience that is very unlike, I think, any other product in the space. And from my experience, just DMing people who have had hot takes and be like, yo, have you actually tried the app? Or like, what do you think? They try it and they're like, oh shit, okay. There's actually something here. So yeah, I would, if you go to the App Store and just search for Zora, it's on Android and iOS and just like have a look around. I'm not saying post or buy, but just like go have a look. Cause I think, it's worth checking out. And then post your hot takes. I would love.
Coin your hot takes
on Zora.
Coin your hot takes. It's so fun.
Post them on Zora, and maybe I'll buy a comment. Yeah.
Well, I think you guys just expanded the sort of file upload limitation, which should allow us to get this episode up as a coin. So
nice.
Good luck to you all out there who get to participate in collecting this lovely episode.
Amazing.
Fun. Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. Always enjoy our conversations.
Thanks to Peace on the jukebox over there.
Yeah.
Just imagine Peace jumping in with this Muppet right now, doing Muppet things. Big thanks to the Manor Hotel. They've been really gracious to us here. And look at this place. It's just
nice.
It's insane. Right. The food was good too, right?
Yep.
Great food. So, we're in sort of Farcon week here. So we have an event tomorrow at 2 p.m., mini app demo day. Also just announced the launch of Crowdfund, which is our first mini app that Nicholas has sort of led on and kind of broke free from the alpha before we even shared it out there. So go give that a look. I think we have that up on our Twitter. We got it all over the places. Is it coined yet? Probably not coined yet, but
you got to coin it.
You got to coin it.
Yeah.
If you don't coin it, does it really exist? But I think Farcon's been great so far. So huge kudos to the volunteer team that has brought this together. And God, New York is great, Josh.
Good city.
I just love it. I mean, this is where we should be, but whatever. All right. I guess what we say, till next week we see you on chain. That's an awkward outro. Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys. We're going to go do other stuff now.
Cool. Thank you.